You are loading crates. That is the first thing you know. Not your name, not your past, not the cold, antiseptic smell of recycled air that hangs over the loading dock, like the memory of something medicinal, something that once meant healing, but now means only process. You know the weight of the crate. 47 kilograms, the number surfacing not as thought, but as fact. The way a gear knows the tension of the spring it is wound against. You know the precise angle of your forearm, the hydraulic sigh of the pneumatic actuator buried where your left elbow used to be, the faint copper warmth radiating from the servos in your shoulder as they compensate for the load. You know all of this the way a machine knows its tolerances. You do not know your name. The dock is vast. It smells of promethium and rust, and the thin, bitter residue of coolant that leaks from the rows of cargo lifters lined up like penitents along the eastern wall. The lighting strips overhead flicker at a frequency no human eye would consciously register, but something in the circuitry behind your eyes, behind what used to be your eyes, notes the inconsistency and files it away. A data point among data points, meaningless and eternal. The floor is durasteel plate, worn silver in the center where decades of foot traffic and servo unit movement have polished it, dark with grease toward the edges. You have walked this floor before, and you have walked it 10,000 times. You do not remember the first time. There is a sound, a voice. It comes from behind you and above, from the overseer's elevated gantry, where a robed figure stands with a data slate in one hand and mild, administrative impatience in their posture. The voice says a designation, not a name, but a two-syllable alphanumeric string, clipped and precise. And something inside the architecture of your skull responds before you do. Your body turns. The motion is smooth, practiced to the point of perfection, and utterly without your consent. Your legs carry you toward the gantry stairs. Your spine straightens into correct load-bearing posture. Your hands, one of flesh and one of jointed steel, hang at your sides in the default idle configuration, somewhere inside the machinery of what you now are. Something older than the augmetics, softer than the cable-threaded muscle, older than the designation. Something that remembers a word, a single word, the way you might remember a dream already half dissolved, reaches toward the surface. It does not make it. The overseer is speaking about manifest errors in Bay 9. Your cognitive processes are already passing the logistical data. The older thing sinks back down like something settling into cold water. You do not know that this is grief. You no longer have the word for it. There is a hierarchy to forgetting. The Adeptus Mechanicus, in their infinite and inscrutable wisdom, understand this hierarchy better than any other institution in the Imperium. They have been refining it for 10,000 years, across 100,000 worlds, with the precision of craftspeople who consider the soul not a divine mystery, but an engineering problem. The soul can be paired, the self can be sectioned, the higher functions, ambition, memory, and the particular texture of grief at the loss of something loved. These go first, cleanly, excised by instruments that would look to an uninformed observer like surgical tools, though the Mechanicus would bristle at the comparison. Surgeons heal. The Mechanicus transforms. What remains afterward is useful, but the body remembers things the mind no longer can. You discover this at 1432 by the ship's internal chronometer, in a corridor 2 levels above the loading dock, and carrying a replacement cogitator unit to Maintenance Bay 7. The corridor is narrow, lit by a single strip of lumens along the ceiling that turns everything a warm amber color. Not gold, nothing as rich as gold, but the color of old candle flame on stone. And as you pass a particular junction, a particular confluence of smells reaches you. Promethium and something sweet, something fermented, something that might once have been food, left too long in a mess hall. And the combination of these things causes a cascade in the autonomic systems. Not a tremor, something smaller, a skip in the rhythm of your breathing mechanism, a fractional hesitation in your stride. The cogitator in your skull logs it as a minor anomaly. But in the space between the anomaly being logged and the next command being processed, there is a fragment. Not a memory. Memories require the apparatus of self, and that apparatus is largely gone. But a sensation, a warmth that is not the warmth of servo motors, a sense of a table, of other people close by, of laughter, not your laughter, someone else's laughter, the kind that rises and fills a room like heat rises, the kind that makes other people laugh in response without knowing why. A smell like this one, or near enough. It lasts perhaps a quarter of a second. You do not know what it was. You resume walking. The cogitator unit is due in Maintenance Bay 7. The corridor stretches ahead of you, inexorable wrath, one of 12 ships in a fleet of the Imperial Navy. A cruiser designated the Inexorable Wrath, one of 12 ships in a fleet currently translating through the warp toward a system whose name you have not been given and would not retain if you had. You are one of 47 servitors currently active aboard this ship. You are the ship's body, its labor, its unresting hands. You deliver the cogitator unit. The fragment does not come again. But it happened. You cannot explain why this matters. You do not have the capacity to understand that it does. The Inexorable Wrath is 4.2 kilometers long. You know this the way you know your own designation. Not because you were told and remembered, but because the information was loaded into the operational data package that constitutes your current assignment profile. You know her gun decks and her engineerium, her bilge corridors and her chapel to the God Emperor, her crew complement of 11,000 souls, and her servitor complement of 47. You know her mass and her warp signature, and the particular harmonic groan she produces when she enters or exits the Empyrean, a sound like a cathedral settling, deep and resonant and vast enough to feel in the cable-threaded places where your ribs used to be. You are in the enginarium when the next translation happens. The enginarium is the loudest place on the ship and the hottest. The plasma drives run at temperatures that would kill an unprotected human in seconds, are contained behind shields of ceramite and adamantium that radiate a dry, almost sacred heat. The kind of heat that feels like standing near something that should not exist. Something whose existence is a continuous act of controlled violence against the natural order. The servitors who work the enginarium are modified differently from you. They are heavier, more machine than flesh. Their organic components reduced to a minimum. I do not acknowledge you, and you do not acknowledge you, and you do not acknowledge them. Then the ship shudders. The sound that accompanies warp translation is not a sound that originates in the physical world. It arrives through the bulkheads and the deck plates. Yes, but it has a quality that vibrates somewhere behind the ear and somewhere inside the structure of the skull, as if the ship's passage through the membrane between reality and the Empyrean produces a resonance that matter itself finds distressing. The lumens flicker. One of the enginarium servitors, a massive thing, more piston than person, with a rebreather unit where its face used to be, pauses its work for exactly 0.3 seconds. Even the machines hesitate. And in the brief, fractured moment of the translation, and something touches the edge of whatever remains of your awareness. It is cold. It is cold the way the void is cold. Not the absence of heat, but something that moves, something that reaches, something that notices you the way a predator notices warmth. Your augmetic eye registers a temperature drop of 2.4 degrees Celsius across your organic components. The cogitator in your skull processes this as a calibration error and corrects for it. The warp, and the ancient sailors of the Imperium call it. Those who know what it truly is and choose metaphor because truth would break something essential in the mind. The sea of souls, the realm of chaos, the dimension that underlies all physical reality like a nightmare underlies sleep. Always there, always pressing. The place where the dead do not always stay dead, and desire has mass and malice has direction. And the Geller field, the ship's defensive membrane against that tide, hums somewhere in the superstructure above you, a sound on the threshold of perception, like tinnitus, like guilt. You return to your maintenance task. 11,000 souls aboard this ship lie in their bunks, or stand their watches, or pray in the chapel. The chaplain conducts the evening rites, his voice carrying through the Vox system, the words of the Imperial Creed rising and falling in the ancient cadences that have been spoken for 10 millennia, on 10 million ships, in 10 billion moments of darkness and fear. In the light of the Astronomicon we are guided. In the shadow of his will we endure. You do not pray. You no longer know how. The Mechanicus does not call it violation. They call it the rite of conversion, the rite of sanctified reduction, the elevation to function. The terminology varies by Forge World, by Magos, by the particular theological flavor of the Omnissiah's doctrine, as practiced in each of the Mechanicus's countless sanctums. But the essential meaning is consistent across all variations, and the essential meaning is this. A human body is raw material. A servitor is a refined product. The transformation between the two states is not a diminishment, but an optimization, a purification, a return to the pure function that the Omnissiah intended when he wove flesh and bone from the dust of the cosmos. You were not asked. Somewhere in the administrative architecture of the Imperium's vast bureaucracy, there is a record of how you came to be here. A court ruling, perhaps. The Imperium uses servitor conversion as punishment for crimes sufficiently grave to warrant permanent removal of agency, but insufficiently grave to warrant death, and those convicted are carried in the ledgers of the Lex Imperialis, with the clinical designation of servitor penal, their crime specified in low Gothic legalese, their sentence listed as indefinite, or perhaps a medici record. The Mechanicus is permitted to claim the bodies of the catastrophically injured, and those whose damage is too severe and too expensive to repair through conventional means, those who would otherwise die, and the conversion is framed in those cases as salvation. They would have been nothing, and now they are useful. Or perhaps, and this is the category that does not appear in any official record, the category that the Inquisition is dimly aware of and chooses not to examine too closely. Perhaps a collection, a taking, and a man or woman who was simply needed and had no powerful friends to prevent the need from being met. You do not know which category you are. You do not know if there is a record, but the body, as has been established, remembers. It remembers in fragments, in autonomic responses, in the small hesitations that the cogitator logs and corrects and logs again, in an unending cycle of anomaly and suppression. At 3:17 ship time, and in the lower cargo holds where you have been assigned a sorting and cataloguing task. In the near silence broken only by the deep structural groan of the hull and the distant bass note thrumming of the Geller field, your hands, one of flesh, one of steel, pass over a piece of cargo that does not belong to the manifest. It is a child's toy, a small thing, cheaply made, moulded from ricosite resin in the rough approximation of a grox. Its paint has faded. One of its legs is broken. It has no business being in this cargo hold and no record in any manifest, and your task assignment protocols flag it as non-standard item requiring disposal. Your hand closes around it, the flesh hand, not the steel one. And for a moment, not a quarter second this time, longer than anything since the smell in the corridor, there is something, not a face, not a name, not even a full sensation, only a weight, the weight of small hands, the weight of being trusted with something that matters to someone who cannot yet articulate why it matters, the weight of being the kind of person someone small runs to. And for that moment, the cargo hold is very quiet, and the Geller field sounds like rain on a roof, and the Grox toy is warm with someone else's warmth, old warmth, warmth from before. Your cogitator logs the hesitation. 4.7 seconds, significant deviation. Your hand opens. The toy falls. You mark it for disposal and move on. You do not look back. Something in the mechanism of your locomotion ensures you do not look back. By the Omnissiah's design, you do not sleep. This is one of the foundational truths of your existence, one of the first modifications, one of the deepest alterations. The removal of the biological requirement for unconsciousness, for the nightly reset that organic minds require to function. Humans sleep because the brain, for all its magnificence, is also a chemical system, and chemical systems accumulate waste products, and waste products require clearance, and clearance requires the suspension of the higher processes that generate them. It is inefficient. The Mechanicus, in their elegant precision, have replaced this nightly suspension with a continuous micro-clearance process, a low-level maintenance cycle that runs alongside waking function, never requiring shutdown, never producing the vulnerability of unconsciousness. You work through what used to be night. The ship cycles through its own dark period, hull lumens dimming to 20% to signal the resting cycle to its organic crew, and the corridors empty of human traffic and fill instead with the quiet industry of maintenance units moving through the shadows, checking seals and testing conduits, and performing the 1,000 small tasks that a ship of this size requires to remain functional. You are among them. The corridors at this hour feel different. Not visually. The dimmed lumens simply reduce the light levels your augmetic eye compensates for automatically. But texturally, acoustically, the ship sounds different when its human contents are asleep. The breath of 11,000 people, even muffled by bulkheads, has a quality to it, a warmth that carries through metal in some diffuse and unmeasurable way. When they sleep, that quality changes. There is a crew member awake when she should not be. You encounter her at a junction near the ship's apothecarium. A young woman in the grey fatigues of a rating, sitting with her back against the bulkhead and her knees drawn up and her face turned down. She is crying, quietly, the way people cry when they are trying not to be heard. The slight elevation of shoulder, the controlled exhale, the occasional sharp intake of breath. That is not quite a sob. She does not look up when you approach. She does not acknowledge you. You are not a person she is aware of. You are infrastructure, a moving part of the ship, no more worth addressing than the ventilation grill above her head. Your tasking protocols note that she is not a logistical obstacle and continue routing you toward your assigned destination. You pass within 2 meters of her. The fragment, the oldest thing inside you, the thing that will not file itself properly, the thing that keeps surfacing despite all suppression, stirs. You know this feeling, and not her specific grief, not the particular weight she carries, but the shape of it, the shape of sitting alone in a corridor in the dark and having no one to tell. You know the shape of it the way you know nothing else. Not your name, not your past, but this, the shape of sitting alone. You do not stop. Your tasking protocols will not permit you to stop for a non-logistical reason. Even if they would, you have no words to offer her. Your Vox unit is capable of producing language, but only in service of task-related communication, only in the vocabulary of function and designation and operational parameters. You do not have the word for "it will pass." You do not have the word for "I see you." You continue down the corridor. Behind you, small and muffled and entirely alone, she continues crying. You do not have the capacity to be haunted, but if you did, the priests of the Omnissiah believe, with the full and absolute conviction of people who have found a theology that perfectly justifies their behavior, that the rite of conversion is an act of grace. This is not cynicism. This is important to understand, because the alternative, the idea that the Mechanicus performs these conversions in full and conscious knowledge that they are acts of violence against the deepest definition of personhood, and does them anyway for the utility value and for the cheap and tireless labor, for the conversion of surplus population into productive resource. This alternative is arguably worse, carries a different quality of horror, one that implicates systems rather than beliefs. The Mechanicus believes. The Magi and the Tech Priests and the Skitarii and all the layered hierarchy of Mars and its 10,000 daughter forges believe it with the genuine and fervent faith of people who have organized their entire civilization around a single sacred proposition, that the universe is a machine, that the machine has a divine nature, and that the purpose of intelligent life is to understand, maintain, and optimize that machine. In this theology, organic inefficiency is a kind of sin. In this theology, the servitor is more perfectly aligned with the Omnissiah's will than the person it was made from. You pass a shrine of the Mechanicus in Corridor 7 Delta, where the tech priests have mounted a small devotional panel. A stylized cog and skull in lacquered copper, surrounded by the smaller icons of the binary cant, the sacred language of the machine spirit, and your augmetic eye notes it and files it as non-structural feature, zero logistical relevance. But the flesh components of your visual system, the organic eye, still original, still biological, still the eye you were born with, linger on it for 0.2 additional seconds. You are wondering something. You are not supposed to be able to wonder, but you are wondering. If the Omnissiah made the universe as a machine, and the machine requires servitors, and servitors require the conversion of people who were once people, then what does the Omnissiah think of the people? What does the God of the machine think of the things that get fed into it? The cogitator in your skull cannot process this question. It is not a logistical problem. It has no optimizable parameters. It routes the inquiry to a catch-all processing node labeled non-functional cognitive event, where it will sit, unresolved, forever. The Mechanicus has 10,000 forge worlds. Each forge world has millions of servitors. Each servitor was once a person. The mathematics of this, expanded to the scale of a galaxy-spanning civilization, 10,000 years old, produces a number so large it ceases to function as a number and becomes instead a kind of permanent atmospheric condition, a quality of the air itself. The Imperium breathes in people and breathes out labor. The exhaled breath is you. You resume walking. The shrine diminishes behind you. The cog and skull watches you go with painted copper eyes. On the 14th day of warp transit, the Geller field fluctuates. You are in corridor 11 Bravo when it happens, running a cable check routine on the secondary power conduits that run behind the bulkhead panels, your steel hand inside the panel housing, and your organic eye tracking the cable manifest on a data slate, while your augmetic eye performs the actual inspection. The routine is meditative in its repetition. Pull panel, insert hand, locate primary trunk, and follow secondary branches to junction points. Check tension, integrity, thermal signature. Replace panel, advance 1.2 meters. Repeat. The fluctuation announces itself as a sound. Not the structural sounds of the ship. You know all of those. They are filed and categorized and identified. The groan of the hull, the thrumming of the Geller field, the distant percussion of the plasma drives. This is different. This comes through the bulkhead, as if the metal itself is producing it, or a frequency below what human hearing would register, but well within the range, your augmetic ear processes, and it has a quality that does not correspond to any mechanical source. It is not rhythmic. It is not consistent. It wavers and rises and drops and circles back on itself, and the quality of the wavering is intentional. You know this sound. You know it the way the fragment knows things, the way the body remembers things the mind no longer can. And this sound is the sound of something in distress, something immense and incomprehensible in its scale. And the distress is directed. It is aimed. It is a call that has no clear origin point, because its origin is everywhere and nowhere, is the warp itself, the dimension the ship moves through like a thought moves through a mind. The Geller field shudders, not physically. No structural shift, no change in the ship's trajectory or velocity, no alarm klaxons triggering in the crew quarters. The shudder is subtler than any instrument can measure. A vibrational event in a frequency that exists between the physical and the Empyrean. And in the half-second of its trembling, a voice comes through the bulkhead. Not a voice you can hear. A voice you can only know. It says your name, not your designation, not the alphanumeric string the overseer calls from the gantry. A name, a sound that your body recognizes before your cogitator can categorize it, and a sound that produces an autonomic response, a spike in organic heart rate, a flash of something chemical and raw through whatever endocrine architecture remains, before the suppression protocols engage and flatten the response back to baseline. The Geller field stabilizes. The sound stops. The bulkhead is just metal again. Your cogitator logs the incident as a minor warp incursion event, sub-threshold, no action required. But you heard your name, and in the terrible, locked, inaccessible place where the fragment lives, the oldest thing, the part that will not file, the part that keeps surfacing, something reaches toward it. Something that was almost sleeping is almost awake. Not a memory, not a self, but a direction, a towardness, a wanting to be. The cable manifest demands attention. You resume the check routine. There are 47 servitors aboard the inexorable Wrath. You encounter them as you encounter the ship's structural features. They are there. They exist. They occupy the same corridors and perform related tasks. And you are no more socially connected to them than you are to a particular hatch or ladder. The rite of conversion does not leave space for community. The social instinct, the human drive toward affiliation and recognition and the formation of bonds with others of the same kind. This is categorized by the Mechanicus as a high-order function, an inefficiency, a cognitive process that generates no logistical output. It is among the first things removed. But bodies remember. You are in the Servitor maintenance bay, a utilitarian space, stripped down to pure function, the kind of room that has never been named, because names are for places where someone might feel something. When you observe another servitor experiencing what the cogitator would classify as a calibration event, but which you recognize with the older part of you as something else entirely, it is a former guardsman. You can tell by the bone structure, by the military standard augmetic leg that replaced an original prosthetic rather than an organic limb. Whoever performed the conversion worked around an old injury, incorporated the prior modification, built the servitor on top of a soldier who had already been partially rebuilt. It carries the posture of military conditioning in the set of its shoulders, in the angle of its jaw, even with the cranial modifications and the interface ports and the weapon mount that replaced its left arm with a plasma cutter. It has paused in the center of the maintenance bay. No task has been interrupted. No equipment has malfunctioned. It is simply standing still in a way that is not the stillness of standby mode, not the dormancy of an inactive unit, but the stillness of a person standing still. A person who has stopped because something inside them needs a moment to process something the cogitator cannot process. The plasma cutter arm is raised slightly, just a few degrees, as if it was reaching for something, and the something never arrived. The two of you stand in the maintenance bay. You cannot speak to it about this. You cannot ask what it remembers, what fragment has surfaced, and whether it heard a name in the bulkhead, or hesitated over a child's toy, or felt the shape of grief in a dark corridor. You do not have the language for any of these questions. The language was taken, but you stand there together, two instruments that were people, in a room designed for maintenance and nothing else, and for 11 seconds, logged by both cogitators as significant deviation. Neither of you moves. Then a task ping arrives. The former guardsman's arm drops. Its posture resolves back into standard operational configuration. It turns and walks toward the door with the smooth, unhurried efficiency of a unit that has never hesitated, will never hesitate, has no memory of hesitation. You follow a moment later. The maintenance bay is empty. It has always been empty. It is a room where nothing is felt, because it was designed by people who believe that feeling is inefficiency, and they were thorough. Consider the Imperium of man. Consider it from outside, from the cold remove of a perspective that can hold it entire. Though no such perspective exists, though the Imperium is too vast for any single mind to comprehend, though the Astronomicon itself, the psychic beacon that burns at the heart of the galaxy and allows the navigators to steer through the warp, is powered by the continuous sacrifice of 10,000 psychically gifted souls who burn out in his service, are consumed at a rate that would be apocalyptic if scaled to any civilization smaller than this one. But here it is simply operational maintenance. The Imperium is 1,000,000 worlds. The Imperium is 1,000,000,000,000 people. The Imperium is 10,000 years of unbroken war on every front, against the alien, against the heretic, against the mutant, against the demon that comes through every crack in the Geller fields of every ship in every warp transit, across the breadth of a galaxy, and against entropy itself, against the slow dying of systems and institutions and supply chains and the fading of knowledge over generations, until what was once understood is now only ritual, only rote performance, only the echo of comprehension. In this context, you are a solution. The Imperium requires labor of staggering scale. It requires bodies that will not tire, will not demand payment, will not organize, will not rebel, will not have needs that compete with the needs of the institution. The hive worlds produce billions of people, and the billions of people produce demands for food, for shelter, for meaning, for the small dignities of personhood that make life distinct from mere biological process. And these demands are expensive and complicated and sometimes politically inconvenient. A servitor produces no demands. A servitor requires only maintenance and the occasional replacement of worn components and basic caloric input to sustain the organic elements. And, in exchange, it provides perpetual, uncomplaining, perfectly calibrated labor. This arithmetic is practiced across 1 million worlds. On Necromunda, entire underhive populations are cycled through the conversion process, the poorest and most expendable transformed into labor units for the spire industries above. On the forge worlds of Mars and Risa and Metallica, the conversion lines run without cease, and processing criminals and debtors and the incurably ill and the politically inconvenient in numbers that the Mechanicus's own data organs decline to aggregate, because the aggregate would be a number that even the Mechanicus finds uncomfortable, and the Mechanicus finds very few numbers uncomfortable. On the ships of the Imperial Navy, on the stations of the Chartist captains, in the manufactura of 1 million hive cities, in the laboratories of the Inquisition and the apothecaria of the chapters, and the countless other institutions that make up the vast and grinding machinery of the Imperium, servitors work. You work. You are a drop in an ocean of converted souls, an ocean so vast it has no shore, an ocean that has been filling for 10,000 years since the Horus heresy shattered the early Imperium's more careful practices and left the Mechanicals without meaningful oversight, without the checks that the Emperor's original compact with Mars had tried to maintain. In the 10,000 years since Horus fell and the Emperor was interred on the Golden Throne, the ocean has been filling. It is very full now. On the 19th day of warp transit, you dream. This should not be possible. The modification that removed the sleep requirement also removed the architecture that generates dreams. The slow wave states, the hippocampal replay cycles, the processing that the organic brain performs in darkness to consolidate and integrate and sometimes produce the strange, narrative-adjacent experiences that waking minds call dreams. You have none of this architecture. You were thorough when they built you. Any who ever built you. They were craftspeople, whatever else they were, and their craft was comprehensive. And yet, at 3:42 ship time, during a routine maintenance patrol of the lower decks, you stop walking. You are in the bilge corridors, the lowest accessible level of the ship, a series of passages so narrow that 2 people could not pass abreast, lined with the pipes and conduits and structural elements that keep the ship alive. The plumbing of a vessel the size of a small city. The lights down here are minimal. Single lumens every 10 meters producing pools of amber light separated by long bands of darkness. And the sound is different from the rest of the ship. Deeper, more resonant. The thrumming of the plasma drives coming up through the deck plates as a vibration you feel in the soles of your feet and the jointed steel of your augmetic arm and the base of your spine. It smells of condensation and metal and something faintly biological, at the ambient smell of a living ship. You stop walking. And then, in the bilge corridor of the inexorable wrath, 19 days into warp transit, 47 kilograms of converted flesh and augmetic steel and suppressed humanity standing in the amber dark, you experience something the cogitator has no category for. A name. Your name. Not the two-syllable designation. A name that belonged to a person. A name that was called across rooms, called with affection. Says it, and you know. With the certainty says it, and you know. With the certainty of something deeper than cognition, that they mean you, specifically you. Not a designation, but a person. The cogitator attempts to suppress it. The suppression protocols engage in sequence. First the emotional flattening, then the relevance filtering, and then the task refocus. And they work. They have always worked. They will always work, because they were built by craftspeople, and the craft was comprehensive. They work. But they work on a fragment that is now a little larger than it was, and in the half second before the suppression completes, you know, not remember, not reconstruct, but know, in the body, in the flesh hand, in the organic eye that lasts 0.2 seconds too long on shrines and toys, you know that there was a life, that it was specific, that it had texture and weight and smell and the warmth of being known by someone, that the rite of conversion did not consume it entirely, that something remains, the suppression completes. You resume your patrol. The bilge corridor is long. The amber lights count themselves out ahead of you, one by one, into the dark. You will serve for the rest of your operational lifespan. This is not a sentence that was spoken to you. It was not explained, not justified, not offered with the comfort of context. It is simply the architecture of your existence, the load-bearing wall of what you now are. The inexorable wrath will eventually reach its destination. The cargo will be unloaded, new cargo will be taken on, and the ship will travel again, through the void and through the warp, from system to system. I'm engaged in the eternal logistical sustaining of the Imperium's unending war against everything. You will be there. You will carry the cargo and check the cables and maintain the conduits and perform whatever functions the operational data package specifies. And when your organic components begin to fail, the flesh hand, the eye, the lungs, the cardiac tissue, the mechanicus will assess whether replacement is economical, and if it is, they will replace, and if it is not, they will decommission, and the thing that was you will be disassembled, and the augmetic components will be cleaned and repurposed, and the organic components will be disposed of, and the designation will be reassigned to the next unit in the conversion queue. This is the covenant. It is unilateral. It was not negotiated. You were not present for its drafting, or rather, you were present. Your body was present, laid on the conversion table, and the air smelling of antiseptic and hot metal, and the particular sharpness of mechadendrite lubricant. But you were not consulted, because consultation is not a concept that applies to raw materials. The Imperium has been making this covenant for 10,000 years, since the Emperor was interred on the Golden Throne, after Horus drove his blade through everything the Great Crusade had hoped to build, since the Mechanicus consolidated its autonomy in the chaos of the heresy's aftermath and the age of apostasy that followed, since the 10,000 years of grinding, unending, total war that the Imperium has sustained on every front against foes that do not grow tired and do not negotiate and do not offer terms. In those 10,000 years, the Mechanicus has converted. The conversion lines have run. The ocean of converted souls has filled and filled and filled, and the Imperium has endured, and the endurance has required the conversions, and the conversions have fed the endurance, and the wheel has turned. You are not a tragedy to the Imperium. You are a resource. The distinction matters only to the resource. The warp transit ends on the 22nd day. You are in cargo bay 9 when the translation alarm sounds. A single tone, low and sustained. The signal for all crew and servitor units to secure against the transition back to real space. You secure. Your magnetized boots engage with the deck plates. Your steel hand grips a structural bar. Your organic hand, beside it, curls around the same bar for no mechanical reason, because the grip of the augmetic is sufficient, and because the organic hand's contribution to structural stability is negligible, because you do not need to hold on. But the organic hand holds on. The translation happens. The sound, that cathedral settling, reality groaning between the worlds resonance, moves through the ship. The lumens flicker. The Gellerfield completes its last cycle and powers down. And in the moment of its powering down, in the breath between the Empyrean and real space, there is a fractional absence of its suppressing hum, a silence of perhaps half a second. And in that silence, nothing, or almost nothing. A warmth where the organic hand holds the bar. Not servo warmth, not the warmth of processed electrical resistance in the circuitry nearby. The warmth of a hand that is still, somehow, a hand. The warmth of something alive in a system that has tried very hard to categorize it as a component. The ship breaches back into real space. The stars appear on the Auspex returns. Cold points of light in the darkness, each one a nuclear furnace burning for billions of years, each one indifferent, each one ancient. The destination system resolves. 11,000 crew members exhale. The chaplain begins the rites of safe arrival, his amplified voice moving through the Vox system like water through corridors, filling the ship. Your task assignment updates, new cargo, bay assignments, manifest verification. The work of arrival, the endless specific labor of keeping this ship, this small piece of the Imperium, functioning and supplied and capable of continuing. The data package is long. It will occupy you for many hours. It will occupy you the way all tasks occupy you, completely, efficiently, without remainder. Almost without remainder. You release the bar, both hands, the steel one first, then the flesh one, the flesh one last, and for the briefest interval between its release and your first step toward the cargo manifest, the hand hangs at your side, open, the fingers in an almost gesture, the particular shape of a hand that was, moments ago, holding something. The cogitator logs the delay, 0.8 seconds, corrects. You walk toward the cargo. The ship hums around you. Plasma drives, recycled air, the distant prayers of the chaplain still threading through the Vox, the footsteps of 11,000 people going about their lives in all their inefficient, demanding, irreplaceable fullness. The Imperium stretches away in every direction from this ship. 1,000,000 worlds, 1,000,000,000,000 people, 10,000 years of history all converging on this moment, this dock, this particular arrangement of steel and flesh and suppressed memory walking toward a cargo manifest in Cargo Bay 9. You begin the work. It is what you do. It is all you do. It is all you are almost all. In the bones of your organic hand, in the specific pressure memory of the bar, in the flash of warmth that happened in the half-second between the warp and the stars. Something holds on. It does not have a name, not anymore, but it is there. It endures.